Bueno, mi gente. It is Monday. It's the start of another beautiful week. We got some people already in the building. Y'all make sure to hit that like as y'all come in through the door. Team Batman Boxing. Salute Cali X. Good money on the stoppage from Munguia this weekend. Impressive performance, but exactly what I was expecting. Ryder would have some success, but get outworked and overwhelmed. That makes one of us. I thought Ryder would have more success, and I'll get into that. Munguia Brida para la RAZA. Viva Mexico, cabrones. Look at this. Look at this. We rocking the flag today. We are rocking the flag today. Jaime Munguia, the coming out party, the star. Munguia, star-making performance for Jaime Munguia. He put it down for La RAZA. Whoo! Boy, what a performance. And we're going to be jumping into that. Anthony Sanchez, appreciate you coming through. Salute to Calix. Salute to you. Remy in the building. Tell me Munguia versus Canelo next, Porfas. I don't think so. I don't think so. I would love that. I would love that. And I'm going to give my opinion. This is going to be one of those shows, fellas. This is going to be one of those shows where we get into uncomfortable territories and we thrive in that spot, right? Like uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable for some people. The conversation we're going to have today, but it's a conversation we need to have. And we're going to talk about it. And we're going to have some fun. Have fun. We're here to be entertained. And we're going to entertain. We're going to try to, at the same time, educate Mexico. Remy in the building. Mexico, Mexico, Mexico. So let's start with that. I see Jaime Munguia come through that building, that arena on Saturday night. Before I say that, on the undercard, Fundora fought Christina Cruz, right? And D-Style's still out there having a spasm. Shout out to D-Style. My brother. Shout out to him. Hermano. You need to let it go. Christina Cruz turns her back and gets knocked out or a stoppage, right? And D-Style still going on about the stoppage and how it was unfair stoppage. And Mayweather should have lost 27 fights because he turned his back at 27 fights. And since he turned his back, he should have been stopped. We need to keep it consistent. I don't know, man. I don't know what happened. I don't know what needs to be called there. All I'm saying, man, is you got to pick your battles. And that's not one that I'm going to fight. I don't know what the right call was there. Should they call a stoppage? Should they not call a stoppage on Christina Cruz? I know she worked hard to get that shot. And there's no telling what the scorecards were at that point at the stoppage. And we know now that she was down significantly on the card. And I had her down 6-3 going into the 10th round. I got to be honest. I know some people out there had Christina Cruz winning. I know a lot of people felt she was hosed with the stoppage. All I'm saying is I had Fundora up. I thought Fundora was taking over the fight, and it was unfortunate how things played out. She tripped. She turns her back. I thought she had adequate enough time to turn her back, and she didn't. And that's not a battle that I'm going to fight right now. I'm just not. You got to be able to. I think we need to let that one go. Canelo versus Bud is great, but Canelo has to be stripped. Mm-hmm. Yep. If we need to put this out there, fellas, like this is coming from Shava ESPN, seems like a good reporter. We need to be comfortable about what we take as gospel. We need to be comfortable that we need to understand that these are just rumors at this point. So we'll see how this plays out. But I'm going to, the conversation that we're going to spin off into, we're going to start with Munguia, then we're going to spin off into another conversation completely that involves Munguia indirectly. And when we do that, we're going to assume, let's assume today for sake of discussion that this rumor is true, and we'll do that. Shout out to you, Inouye Zillin. I appreciate the 199 super chat, and I agree with you, by the way. I agree. I'm going to wait to hit the like button, see if you fit my narrative. Shout out to JC. Shout out to Outlaw watching from Philippines. Shout out to the Philippines. I've always gotten love from the Philippines back to the Pacquiao days. So shout out to all the beautiful people out in the Philippines. Shout out to all the beautiful, I got to say it low because my wife's in the other room. Shout out to all the beautiful Filipino women. Shout out to them. Just kidding. Fundora whooped her ass. That's what happened. You're going to have a lot of that. Canelo sends Crawford to the shadow realm, in my opinion. Possible. I think so too. Shava also reported Canelo versus Berlanga. We need to take this lightly. This is what I'm saying. We're going to take this reporting today for the sake of discussion, because it all ties in with the conversation that I wanted to have last week with D-Style, and we didn't have time to have this conversation. So just for the sake of discussion, it's a nice spinoff from reporting that could be true or false. And it's going to give us a picture of macro and micro, and how I think it will play out macro if this is the case, and how I will handle it on a micro level, because I don't want there to be any sort of ambiguity about how I'm going to handle it on an individual level. But Jaime Munguia, let's get this energy up. I'm watching him enter that arena. And by the way, 10,600 people were in that arena to watch Jaime Munguia. They're in there. They're pumped up. They're doing the wave. This isn't a big undercard. So this is Jaime Munguia selling this event in Phoenix. And that's important because he's selling in the right markets. This isn't just a hometown fight. He's selling in good markets. Phoenix, this guy could sell in LA. This guy could sell in Dallas. This guy could sell in Houston. This guy can sell in San Antonio. He can sell in multiple places if you put him there, right? And Phoenix is another spot. And 10,600 is important. Why? Because it's 1,100 more than David Benavidez sold in Phoenix, just to give you an idea. And I'm not saying that to take a shot at David Benavidez. That's David Benavidez's hometown. He's outselling David Benavidez and Oscar Valdez in Phoenix, fellas. That's important. That's important. So it's not just, it's the live gate. It's how many people are being comped, not being comped. This is an organic market. There's an organic fan base in Phoenix, Arizona, that Jaime Munguia is selling. And from the Mexican people that I talk to, that I'm friends with in boxing, he draws a different crowd. He draws a Canelo type of crowd. It's a different type of crowd. I'm going to get to Drew's super chat in a minute, but Drew has been there. I've been to these fights with Drew. I went to Canelo versus Triple G3 with Drew, and he'll tell you, and people will tell you, Canelo draws a money crowd. This is the crowd where you have a lot of women in the crowd, and they're looking down at, they're not even watching the fight. These are the people that you wonder why, and I'm watching it. I'm in the arena, and I'm telling Drew, this place is only 60% full for the co-main event for Bam Rodriguez. 60% full. And as soon as the fight starts to, get announced a little bit, we start to get to Anthem's ring entrances, this place just starts to pack. And it's a different crowd at that point. It goes from a pro boxing crowd to a money crowd. You got the dudes walking in with their suits. They got their beautiful women tied to their arm. These women are not even watching the fight as it goes on. They don't care who's winning the fight, how they're winning the fight. They don't care. It's a FOMO crowd, fear of missing out. Jaime Munguia, from what I'm told, from people who were there and from people who have attended Bam Rodriguez fights, David Benavidez fights, it's a different type of crowd. It's a money crowd. It's a live gate crowd. And now he's doing it in multiple arenas, multiple cities. This guy, fellas, he's a star. He's a star. He's there now. He's a star. Did you see news? Canelo only fighting FBA brothers are getting accused of ducking. LOL. I love the chaos and no more D-style bad stoppage talk. D-Style is on the front line of the bad stoppage with Christina Cruz, and he is battling he's back against the wall. He's taking on all the zombies. He's taking on everybody. He's just constantly shooting. And everybody's like, D-Style, just drop it. Just drop it. She's going to lose the fight anyway. It doesn't matter. She turned her back. Like, Mayweather, really? You think they were going to stop a fight off Mayweather, who wasn't even hurt when he turned his back? D-Style just keeps going. He is fighting that battle. He's fighting the good fight. So shout out to D-Style. But yes, I did see the Canelo news that broke, and could be fake news, could be real news. Like I said, Like somebody said earlier, Shava also reported that Canelo was going to fight Berlanga, and that didn't happen. So we'll see. We'll see if this is true or not. We don't know. I think a lot of people want it to be true, and we're gonna dive into this and pretend that it's true for the sake of conversation after we get into the Munguia talk. But Munguia, I'm telling y'all, fellas, this guy's a star. He's a star, and he made me proud to be Mexican on Saturday night. Remy gave me keys to the whip. Remy told me that I'm Mexican. He said, Calix, I'm giving you the Mexican card. I'm handing it to you. Even though you're not Mexican, I pull up the 23andMe. I'm not Mexican, but he's handing me the Mexican card so I can speak from experience as part of RAZA to see who is RAZA. And Jaime Munguia is RAZA, and he's putting it down for RAZA, and he did that Saturday night. Look, this is what we wanted to see from Munguia. We wanted to see him fight fights, right? And we were kind of out on Munguia for a while, right? It was, man, can he stop turning down title shots at 160? For the love of God, can we please stop that? And then can he fight more? Because Oscar, like, if he's not fighting the fights, can he fight more? You fought him once in 2023. How are you hiding a diamond in the rough? Why are you doing this? We've talked about this, right? It's like, you ever seen Dirty Dancing? And the final scene, baby, she's in the corner. She's in the corner. And Patrick Swayze walks in with the tight shirt, tight t-shirt. For whatever reason, Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing was walking around with a leather jacket the whole time. It's a summer camp. The dude's got a leather jacket on at a summer camp, but he walks in with that tight shirt. He looks directly at Baby's father and says, nobody puts Baby in a corner. He grabs her hand, brings her out to the dance floor for the greatest dance ensemble of all time in a movie. And Baby shines. Oscar's been putting Baby in a corner. Oscar's been putting Jaime in that corner. Oscar's been turning down title shots for this guy. Jaime wants to fight the fights. Jaime wants to fight. And this dude's fighting him once in 2023. And we've been saying, Oscar, unleash the dude. Oscar, unleash William Zepeda, the Mexican murder hornet. These are the most exciting fighters in the sport that you guys are not moving correctly. So finally on Saturday night, I see Jaime walk in. He's walking in with that, I think it's like a velour jumpsuit with the Blessed Mother's chain around his neck, the rosary. And he's looking like $1 million. And I'm looking at him, I'm getting that feeling in my chest, in my stomach, in my gut. And I'm saying, Jaime's going to show out tonight. I just have a feeling. My spidey senses tell me that Jaime is going to show out tonight. He's going to put a beating on John Ryder. And what a statement that would be, because what did I talk about last week? And I'm going to have people all over me. Triangle theory doesn't work. Fighter A beating fighter does. I know it doesn't work. We know that. We're intelligent enough to know that. But what I've told you in the past is managers, promoters know this. It's the move. It's the reason they do it. And it's the reason that we were let down when Benavidez did not knock out Caleb Plant. The move is you fight a common opponent of the guy you want. This is your target up here, right? Who did he just fight? He just fought Caleb Plant. He knocked him out 11th round. All right, we're going to fight him. We're going to knock him out before the 11th round. Benavidez doesn't do that. Beats him, doesn't knock him out before, right? Jaime Munguia, they want Canelo Alvarez at some point. Who did Canelo Alvarez just fight? John Ryder. We're going to fight John Ryder. Canelo did not knock out John Ryder. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And I got my own people coming at me now. Fellow Canelo fans. And get used to it, because I have a feeling that this is going to happen more often in the coming months. We're about to swerve off into some uncomfortable territory, have some uncomfortable conversations, and I'm here for it. It is what it is. But I put out a tweet that now we have organic, and I said this last week, if Munguia knocks out John Ryder in this fight, now we're talking. Now we have some organic talk behind Canelo versus Munguia. Before Canelo versus Munguia, Oscar is saying we want Canelo. It's like, whatever. What is this? What is this? Now what happens? Munguia knocks out John Ryder. And I understand Liza's going to come after me for this. Liza's going to say, Canelo softened him up, Calix. Canelo, and probably so. He probably did. Liza, you got a point. I get it. He softened him up. But, as we'll talk about as this show goes on, as this podcast goes on, as the months go on, boxing fans are not nuanced thinking people. Neither are the power brokers. They're not. We got to get used to the market that we're in, particularly in America. This is a style over substance market. And people aren't going to get into nuanced thinking of Canelo softening up Ryder before the Munguia fight so Munguia can come behind and knock out Ryder. No. People aren't going to get nuanced into saying, look, they have another common opponent in which Canelo knocked him out, Munguia didn't. Fellas, there's a reason that they do this move. Triangle theory, we know it doesn't work. We know since Munguia knocked out John Ryder and Canelo didn't, that doesn't equal to Munguia beating Canelo. We don't know that. But what it does is it builds organic talk of a fight between Canelo and Munguia in the future. It does. Now we're there. Munguia brings out Mexican David can never get. Shout out to Drew. And once again, we're about to swerve off into some uncomfortable conversations as far as this goes. I think this is one of those shows where nobody's going to leave happy. Nobody's going to leave happy today. Because we're going to... The Benavidez fans are not going to be happy with some of the stuff I have to say today, but then they're going to be happy with some other stuff. Canelo fans, same thing. The Munguia fans, I think they'll leave very happy, though. Because as I'm watching, and shout out to you, Drew. Appreciate that. And Remy, Munguia is a star and a threat at 168. I agree. So coming in, what were some of the stuff that I was saying about Munguia? You know, I think he beats Berlanga, but that's a fight you need to do because I don't think Munguia wins against top level guys at 168. So you need to fight these guys. And the beautiful thing is, you know, with the Munguia, I don't think his ceiling is that high, but as long as you put him in the fights, it's fine if he loses. And look, he's an action fighter and you need to fight action fighters. And the beautiful thing about him is there's a lot of forgiveness there. So even if they're losing the fights, the fan base is not going to lose as long as they're fighting the fights. And that's why the way Oscar has been bringing this guy up until the Derevyanchenko fight has been wrong. But now what do we have? We have him beating Derevyanchenko, and we've got him knocking out John Ryder. Now we're there. People have been asking this guy to step up. He stepped up now. Derevyanchenko, I was thinking about this Saturday night. Derevyanchenko, if you look at his career, man, what could have been with this guy? All of his fights were close losses, and they were all to names. You talk about Golovkin, you talk about Charlo, you talk about this fight right here with Munguia, or his fight last year with Munguia. All close losses. Derevyanchenko is a tough fighter, and I think over time, these wins against Derevyanchenko for these fighters, Golovkin's win against Derevyanchenko, for example, they age better because Derevyanchenko is just a tough fighter that you're not going to go in there and look good against. You're not going to go in there and wipe this guy out. He's going to be in close fights with fighters. He's a perfect gauge opponent. And looking at it now, he passed that test. It's a close fight. He passed the test. And now he fights John Ryder, a common opponent of Canelo, and beats him better than Canelo. And I understand triangle theory doesn't work. I understand that doesn't mean he beats Canelo because I don't think he beats Canelo. But what I'm saying is it gets people talking now. And when you do that on top of drawing in multiple cities now, you're from Mexico, you're coming to America and drawing in multiple American cities, you're outdrawing guys who are from Phoenix. You're outdrawing Arizona fighters. You're outdrawing Benavidez in his hometown. It's a big statement. And the Benavidez fans are going to get mad when we say that, but Benavidez is the B-side to Munguia. Let's be honest about that. He outdrew Benavidez in Benavidez's hometown. And we talked about it's a different type of crowd. It's a money crowd with Munguia. And on top of that, I'm watching it, and like I'm kind of reluctant. Freddie Roach, he's with Freddie Roach, and everybody's like, Freddie Roach is gonna solve all his problems. And I'm watching him, I'm like, man, he looks good. He looks sharp. He looks more patient, but at the same time, the punch placement is better. The patience is better, but at the same time, he's not losing his identity. You don't want a trainer to come in and change a fighter in his identity. You don't want that. You want the trainer to keep the identity of that fighter, just brushing some things up on the side. That's what you want. And it looks like they did that on Saturday night. Munguia bodied John Ryder. Anytime John Ryder tried to get on his front foot, Munguia held his ground and said, nope, get back. Get back. Get back. This is my night. I'm fighting on the front foot. Every once in a while, you saw Munguia circle the ring, use his jab. But for the most part, Munguia was Munguia. It wasn't confusion. A lot of times these fighters get with new trainers when they're already established as fighters, right? And they look confused in the ring because it's off. Look at Deontay Wilder, for the love of God, against Joseph Parker. Somebody joked and said Malik Scott turned Deontay Wilder into Malik Scott. He looked confused. He looked out of it. He didn't look like Deontay Wilder. He hasn't looked like Deontay Wilder. His identity is gone. Jaime Munguia got with a new trainer, and he's still Jaime Munguia. Same fighter. You don't change that. Pressure fighter. Put pressure on your opponent. Go and knock guys out. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being an action fighter. There's nothing wrong with getting hit as long as you're doing damage, more damage to your opponent. We can talk about how sustainable that is in the future. We can talk about where his ceiling is in the future. But right now, I know that this guy is a star. If he's not there yet, it's about to happen. It's as sure as the sun coming out in the morning. He's there. And people are going to say he's not ready for Canelo, fellas. It's the wrong way to look at it. If a fighter says he's ready, if his team says he's ready, he puts on great performances, he's ready. If he loses the fight, he loses the fight. Canelo wasn't ready for Mayweather. Guess what? So what? He fought the fight. And he was fine. Turns out he wasn't ready for Bivol. Guess what? It's fine. He lost the fight. We're still here. Munguia loses fights. It's fine. We're still here. As long as he's fighting the fights. You have a beautiful scenario materializing, developing with Jaime Munguia, because you have an action star who looks like he's actually better than we thought. He looks like his potential is actually, his ceiling is actually higher than I thought. I'm going to put myself in this. I'm watching Jaime Munguia fight John Ryder and just bodying him and beating up on him and picking his spots when to get aggressive and start to unload on those hooks, get low, use his legs better, has better foundation, and he stops John Ryder. Stops him. Doesn't knock him out cold. He stops a tough fighter who, other than a decade ago, has not been stopped, and that was sort of a fluke stoppage. John Ryder has fought hell of fighters, like great fighters, really good fighters. Hasn't been stopped. Munguia did it. And he did it meticulously. He did it in an intelligent way. This wasn't a fluke. He went in there and bodied John Ryder, a top 5 guy at 168. So not only does it look like Munguia is going to be a star, he's an action fighter, he looks like a legitimate threat to the throne at 168. He looks like a legitimate threat to anybody at the top, in the top 5, top 10 at 168. He's there. He set everything up beautifully. And all of it came together. It's not only the performance, the result, who he beat, it's the crowd. It's how lively they were. And they're there for him. They're not there for anybody in the undercard. They're not there for a great card because it wasn't a great card. They're there for him. He's outselling Benavidez in Benavidez's hometown. He's outselling Valdez in Valdez's area. This guy's a star. You could put him in Vegas. You can put him in Phoenix. You can put him in San Antonio. You can put him in Houston. You can put him in Dallas. You can put him in LA. You can put him in any multiple of markets. And by the way, you can put him Puerto Rican Day weekend, which I think is a great possibility, against Berlanga. And he absolutely destroys Berlanga in New York. And I think that would sell out Madison Square Garden too. Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry is back. That's the fight to make. Realistically, I don't think he gets the Canelo fight in May. I would love to see it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'd love to see that fight. I'd love to see Mexican showdowns at 168. That's what I want. Would love to see it. But realistically, I think we're looking at Munguia versus Berlanga. If Berlanga wins his fight coming up in a couple weeks, and I think we have a big Mexico versus Puerto Rico showdown, possibly at MSG on Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend. And it would be big. And I'll tell you this, Munguia is going to bury Berlanga. Bury him. And it turns out it's not fair to Munguia to compare Berlanga to Munguia. They're not on the same level. I'm telling you that after watching this fight Saturday night. Berlanga is not on Munguia's level, and Munguia is going to prove that if these two dudes fight each other. Berlanga's out there wearing his Terror Squad chain, biting dudes on the ear or the neck or wherever he's biting them. Barely active. And look, nobody should be bragging about being part of Terror Squad in 2024. This dude's wearing a Terror Squad chain in 2024. Dude, it's not 1999. This isn't a quarter century ago. And Munguia is going to put a stop to all that. Berlanga can come walk into the ring with Timberland boots around his neck, Terror Squad chain, bubble vest jacket, all this stuff. It all ends the same way. It ends with him looking up from the canvas up at Jaime Munguia celebrating. That's how it ends. Jaime can fight. Jaime can fight. And I did have a couple betting dudes telling me this before this fight. Alex, you're being a little tough. Look, you need to understand that, I know you like resume, but look, the resume nerds, a lot of times they miss the eye test. And what I'm telling you is there's truth in both. It's easier to look good when you're not fighting great competition, right? And people will those guys will turn to this scenario, the betting guys who rely on the eye test to see value, and they see value in guys like Boots, Tank, and some of them saw value in Jaime Munguia before he even beat John Ryder. And we're expecting this, and good for them. They expected Jaime Munguia to win by knockout. He did that. Most of the boxing public did not. But you can point to Jaime Munguia winning this fight and say, I told you so, and resume doesn't matter. It's all about the eye test and all this stuff. But both are true. You need guys who are able to look at things stylistically and tell the potential of a fighter no matter who they're in the ring with. But you also need resume guys. You also need resume nerds, too, to check you. Because without those resume nerds, these guys will just fight pedestrian level opposition like Tank for their whole career if they didn't have people keeping them honest. Nonetheless, great performance from Jaime Munguia. I was so impressed. I was so proud to be Mexican on Saturday night. So proud. What a performance. What a performance. It's just one of those performances that I just left happy. I was happy because you want stars. We keep saying, like, where are these stars going to come from? Even the action fighters, like, those are the easy ones. Those are the layups for promoters and managers. Those are layups because all you have to do is fight them. All you have to do is put them in fights once per year. You fought this guy once in 2023. What is that? How are you hiding arguably the most exciting fighter in the sport? It's a sure thing that guy's a star. Just put him in fights. You're putting baby in the corner. Get her up off the table and put her on the dance floor. Right in the center of attention where she belongs. And that's what happened Saturday night is Patrick Swayze grabbing baby and say, let's dance. And Jaime Munguia danced on Saturday night, and that was a beautiful thing. It was beautiful. It's great for the sport because now we have another guy to throw in the mix. And, I'm going to talk about the Mexican dynamic to this, too. I joke around a bit about being Mexican and all this stuff with Remy, but I've always had a deep appreciation for Mexican boxing, especially since I've come to know Mexican-American boxing fans and the legacy behind it, the importance of it, and how if you look at the current market in America, Mexican-American boxing fans carry this market. They carry it. They carry it. I don't know if y'all have looked around recently, but the white dudes have left the building. They've left. Other than Caleb Plant, I don't think there's another white American fighter in the top 10 in any weight class. 17 weight classes. Go pick them. Go look. Top 10. Go look in any weight class. 170 fighters. I think you only have one white American fighter. I don't think Joe Smith Jr. is in the top 10 anymore. He might be. I don't know, but 2 at best. And look around. All of the white American boxing fans that were here 10, 15, 20 years ago, they're following UFC or whatever. Football, basketball, whatever. It's the Mexican-American boxing fans who are carrying American boxing. They're carrying this market. And that's why it's important to have Jaime Munguia around. It's why we've been getting frustrated with an Oscar De La Hoya for sort of holding this guy back, in my opinion. And now we're here. And now we've got something promising. Now we've got a possible star. Not only in Mexico, but in America going forward. Golden Boy is back with the star, Munguia, and Virgil. I think Virgil's got a little further to go than Jaime. But we'll see. I just say that because there seems to be a disconnect between Virgil and the market, the Mexican-American Mexican market. When I watch his fights in Dallas and around there, it doesn't have the same feel when you're watching it on TV. And I've talked to people who have gone to his fights and they're not selling out arenas, smaller venues, and the crowd doesn't get into it the way you saw in Phoenix on Saturday night. That was a different type of vibe, a different type of crowd. Just telling you. Appreciate the super chat again. In a way, Zilla, Keith Connolly going to ask for ridiculous money for Berlanga versus Munguia. That fight might not happen. We'll see. I expected a decision as well, and I actually bet a decision. I bet a decision. I thought that Ryder was going to get to 12. I thought Munguia, it was a smart play because even if it's a close fight, Munguia is going to get the benefit of the doubt on the scorecards. He's a house fighter. It was a smart play, but turns out the smart play was in the stoppage, and I didn't see it coming. I did not think he was going to stop John Ryder. I didn't think so, and he did. Exceeded my expectations and made me a full-blown fan on Saturday night. Full-blown fan now. Jaime Munguia. Munguia targeted right here. I'm there. All you got to do to get me to be a fan is fight the fights, look exciting. I'm there. Derevyanchenko, John Ryder. We're there now. Looked exciting in both fights. I had a blast. I had a blast watching both of those on TV. I'm at the point now I'll travel to watch them fight. Drink some Modelo's, watch the dude fight. Have fun. I know it's guaranteed good time. That's what we're here for, right? We're here to be entertained. We're here to have a good time. Munguia gives me that. Benavidez better quit clout chasing Canelo, fight Morrell, and quit marinating 24/7, 365. White flag. I love it. Today is going to prove what I've been saying about my chat for a year or two now. This is a diverse chat. People act like we come here and we're in an echo chamber, but what you're going to hear is Some conversation that comes off as pro Benavidez. Then you're going to have some conversation that comes off as anti Benavidez. And when you go to 99% of the channels out there, and I'm not saying this to hold my channel up versus others, I'm saying this to hold my chat up to against other chats. Because it's the chat that makes this channel, not me. I'm just starting the conversation. That's all this is. It's the chat that makes this channel. And I hold my chat up against anybody's chat because I go into other channels. I see these chats and I know what these dudes are doing. I know these are smart people. I know these are smart individuals, but I know they're not going to veer off into uncomfortable conversations to where it's seen as anything negative towards a fighter that, let's say if they've been anti-Benavidez the past couple of years, they're not going to veer off into any kind of pro-Benavidez talk because they don't want to alienate the chat. They don't want to lose the numbers. They don't want to lose the engagement. They don't want to lose the likes. And we're not going to do that here. I'm not going to move the goalposts on Benavidez. I've been saying certain things the past year or two. Been saying things the past year about where I think this 3-fight deal is going. And let's assume this reporting today is true, which is quite the assumption because it could very well be wrong. But I want to take that reporting as a conversation starter and make it very clear where we're going to go, how I'm going to view this in the future if the reporting is true. And how many things can be true at once, by the way. Because once again, nuance, right? And with nuance, sometimes multiple things can be true at once. And we're going to get into that talk in a minute. Eddie Hearn is saving Berlanga for Pacheco. We'll see. We'll see. I just think it's common sense to make Munguia versus Berlanga for both of them. And Oscar, dude, when Oscar is locked in, I love what Oscar does. He'll wheel and deal, right? But he does this thing where he'll say, I want to work with everybody. But then he'll take slick shots. And when it comes to Eddie, not even slick shots. He'll say right after the Munguia fight, I don't know if Eddie has the roster for us to put together a rivalry on a card. He does. Just stop and just make the fights. There's no reason for this war between Eddie and Oscar. The zone needs fights. The zone's starting to have put together a good first quarter. You guys get in the same room and make fights for the boxing fans. That can be good for both of you. And Munguia versus Berlanga is a good fight for both. It's obviously a great fight for Munguia, but it's a good fight for Berlanga because if Berlanga is going to win against a name, stylistically, that could be the one. I don't think it's going to happen, but stylistically, that would be the one. You got to get this guy a fight. I don't want to wait to see a picture. I'm tired of marination. I'm over it. Even slight marination. And once again, we're about to get into that. But I don't want to wait to see a picture develop to 2025. We get to see Pacheco versus Berlanga. Whether he loses to Munguia or not, you can still do the Pacheco versus Berlanga fight in 2025. We don't need to see a build-up to that fight. Just make the fights and see where it goes. See where it takes us. That's all I'm asking. Benavidez brings out the addicts to his fight. Munguia brings out the dealers that sell to Benavidez fans. I've been told things like that. Munguia, Canelo and Munguia bring out different types of crowds. I've been told this by people who've been to their fights. I've been to several Canelo fights. I've seen the type of crowds this dude brings out. Money. Dudes with money and beautiful women. Like beautiful, beautiful women who are there in attendance, taking up space in expensive seats and not even watching the fight. It's money. The real one is in the chat. Stay on code. Was at the fight. The crowd was lit. I know it was. Benavidez is the mandatory almost 2 years. The rule should be followed. That simple. So let's get into this. We talked about Munguia, and we're all there, right? We all saw what we saw Saturday night. Great fight. I was let's set this up. I was talking to Nando. Nando sent me a DM the other day, after the fight, saying, 160 is 168 the deepest division full of entertaining fighters, just entertaining fighters who also have a high ceiling. Like, it's a hot division, and it is. Look at this. Is 168 the deepest division of talented fighters who are also fun to watch? Canelo, Benavidez, Munguia, and Billy Morrell Jr. Pacheco. We would all agree, right, that all those guys are talented and all those guys are fun to watch. You put them in the fights, they're fun to watch. There are positives to say about all six of those fighters. And by the way, also, Canelo entered the division in December 2020, let's just say 2021, and cleaned out the division within 11 months, within the calendar year. But look at the names now. And look, Plant's in the mix still. Charlo's going to be in the mix. You can throw Boo Boo in there. You can throw other fighters in the mix. I'm just talking about the exciting fighters who are talented. Look at how quickly the landscape can change in a division when stuff is moving. That's the positive of Canelo moving to 168, right? He got things popping right away. Right away. Even Canelo's detractors have to say that. He got into 168, so let's go. He got things popping. The title fights happened. They happened. They happened. Take care of the mandatory, but they happened. Right? But now you had almost complete turnover of this division, and now you got a completely different landscape. Look at these names. Canelo, Benavidez, Munguia, and Billy Morrell Jr. Pacheco. In a healthy division, that's how things recycle. That's how quickly things can recycle, right? And I've said this, when it comes to a fighter's career, this is actually where Canelo is right now. It's, to me, the most entertaining part of a fighter's career, a great fighter's career, is how are they going to navigate this? How are they going to navigate the turnover of a division, fighting legacy fights, but still doing meaningful things as far as title fights, still fighting meaningful fighters within their division? Floyd Mayweather left a lot to be desired when he became Money Mayweather, right? And fought. He was fighting guys like Robert Guerrero, Marcos Maidana, guys like that. There was, if you take a snapshot of that welterweight division, there was a point in time when you had Paul Williams, Antonio Margarito, Miguel Cotto, and he'd go on to fight Miguel Cotto at 154 later. But you had these names, even Quintana, Clottey, Zab Judah, who he fought. But you had names in that division, and many of them, Andre Berto at the time, who would go on later to fight, much later. But you had guys in the division at the time that Mayweather just didn't point to, pretending like they didn't exist. And I want to see how Canelo handles this division currently, because when you look at Benavidez, Munguia, and Billy Morrell Jr. Pacheco, this is a younger division, a younger, excited division with talent moving up. He takes care of Plant. He takes care of Billy Joe Saunders. And I don't want to hear the revisionist history, because when he was at 160, the Canelo detractors were acting like Caleb Plant. He would never move up to 168 and beat guys, movers, lateral movement, guys invited to the cookout like Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders. And he does. He runs through them, breaks their faces, makes one of them apologize after the fight. He does it, right? But now we've got a new crop of fighters. So it comes to the point in their career, like, do you do an Andre Ward? Like, some fighters do an Andre Ward. Some fighters do a Floyd Mayweather Jr., and they fight other guys who are not demanded at the time. We want Pacquiao. You're not going to give us Pacquiao. Give us Antonio Margarito. No, I'm not giving you either. You're going to get Robert Guerrero, something like that. So does Canelo do that? Does Canelo do an Andre Ward and just retire as killers are moving up at 175, talented fighters, younger fighters are moving up at 168? I'm just going to retire. And then years later, I'm going to pretend like, hey, I would have beat Anthony Joshua. Hey, I would have went over to UK and fought Carl Froch in a rematch. do things like that, revisionist history, right? He's obviously not going to do that. He said he's not going to retire. I got 3, 4, 5 more years left in me. So it's not that. Then if you're going to stick around, how's it going to look if you fight the fights? Are you going to be Bernard Hopkins? And your resume and your career and your legacy, you move up pound for pound rankings all time by what you're doing later in your career because you're beating guys like John Pascal. You're beating guys like Kelly Pavlik. Younger fighters, I'm going to take on these younger lions. I remember Bernard Hopkins in the lead up to Kelly Pavlik in the countdown show. He says, I understand this guy's a young lion. Everybody's saying he's a young lion, but I just want to see what I have to offer this young lion and Kelly Pavlik. What does he do? He beats the hell out of Kelly Pavlik. Or is it going to be a Roy Jones situation where you stick around for too long and guys see you as carcass and they start to pick you apart? Antonio Tarver, Glenn Johnson, Green, just bad losses. What's it going to be? Because it looks like Canelo's going to stick around. So in what form is Canelo going to stick around in? Is he going to be more of a novelty fighter? Much like what we're seeing with Tank Davis right now, where they just continue to get clever, right? We're going to take the fighter to the UK. We're going to take him to the UK in the summer. Okay, I don't care where you have him fight. You can have him fight in my backyard. Who's he fighting? Is he going to fight somebody? We're going to take Tank to the UK. I don't care. Who's he going to fight? Is he a novelty fighter at this point? Is he a guy who stands on business and is going to defend his title, going to defend his throne at 168? And if so, is he going to be a Bernard Hopkins type character or a Roy Jones type character? A guy who climbs pound for pound all-time rankings by big wins against younger fighters later in his career? Or does he come down notches as Roy Jones did by losing fights that you would have never thought he would have lost? I don't know. This is the point in a fighter's career that I'm very entertained by. I'm very intrigued by how they navigate this. And if the reporting is true with Shava ESPN today, that it's going to be, let me try to get this. It's going to be Charlo in May and then Bud Crawford in September. How do I navigate that? How do I think the market is going to deal with that? Let's attack that first on a macro level. And then how do I attack that as a boxing fan? How do I view that as a boxing fan? How do I view that in my pound for pound rankings and then my divisional rankings? And then do my eyes start to wander a little bit? I'm trying to read this chat real quick. Hold on. Let's see. I would too. I would like a Super 6. The only thing that can derail 168 are delusional fans in the PBC. We've talked about that. Canelo is at the tail end of his career. He's now looking for the best, most lucrative fight. He already proved himself over and over again. I get that. Same people who claim Canelo is following Mayweather playbook, then turn around and say Mayweather is TBE. I understand that. We can certainly talk about the people saying Canelo doesn't fight black fighters and now he's fighting black fighters and they're still not happy, stuff like that. We can certainly talk about all of that stuff, right? Ward is delusional, that he is. We all want the Benavidez fight, but a fighter isn't an official mandatory until a champion is mandated. Understandable. Easy work for Canelo. We need an Al Chile stream. Yep. All right. So let's say Charlo, 160 Charlo, soon to be 168 Charlo. I think it was 164 Charlo, by the way. Gets the fight in May, and then Bud Crawford gets the fight in September. Let's assume that. First of all, it would make yours truly wrong, because what have I been saying? And this is against the better judgment of some people I respect in the business who have been telling me, Calix, I respect you, Calix. 99% of the time I agree with you, but I think you've got this wrong. I've had people in my ear telling me, insiders and such, that Benavidez isn't part of this 3-fight deal. It's not part of the 3-fight deal. He may be part of something after, but not part of the 3-fight deal. And it's like, no, man, like I'm going to trust track record. I think Canelo versus Benavidez happens September 2024. I'm going to stand on business. I've even gone as far as saying I will shut everything down if that fight doesn't happen. And D-Style says, no, you won't because you have a contract with HCP. Fair enough. I'll stick around. But one thing I won't do is revise history. And one thing I will say, and you guys know this from my track record, when I'm wrong, I'm transparent about when I'm wrong. So if this reporting is true, I'll be the first one to say, I thought Canelo versus Benavidez was going to happen in September. It's not happening. I was wrong. That's number one. Let's start there. So then how do we go from there if it's Canelo versus Charlo and then Canelo versus Bud? First of all, I hate Canelo versus Maul. Hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. Hate it. And I've said, look, you want to do Mel, then Maul. I've been saying the first two is going to be Charlo and Charlo. I've thought that for a while. As long as it leads to Benavidez in September, fine, all is forgiven. And it's looking like, if the reporting is true, that's not going to be the case. I hate the Maul fight. Don't like it. I just don't think much of Maul. And I've said this for a while because we've been battling the dude saying, why didn't Canelo fight Charlo? Why didn't Canelo fight? Well, he's doing it now. You should be happy. So let's first say this. The dudes who have been saying Canelo doesn't fight black fighters, Canelo would never fight Charlo. We've been telling you, we even had Roberto Diaz on the channel and say, we offered Charlo a deal in 2019 and they turned it down for a record high payday for Charlo, and he turned it down. They went in the opposite direction. We've been telling y'all, if he's not going to fight that fight, then fight somebody else, do something to organically build demand for a Canelo versus Charlo fight, and he doesn't. But we've been telling you for a while that these dudes are not the dudes. Charlo's not that dude. He's not. 160 Charlo has never been that dude. Boo Boo Andrade has never been that dude. You dudes have been out here manufacturing things that these dudes are the boogeyman, and Canelo's afraid of these dudes, and that's why nobody believes you when you say this stuff. We've been telling you for a while, pick a fighter. Pick one and say, that's Canelo's boogeyman, and then stand on it. But you dudes are picking multiple fighters at once. We've been saying this about the Canelo detractors for a while. They're like the cats trying to reach the laser pointer on the wall. Can you dudes stay focused? Just pick one fighter and it would be more believable and you would have more credibility if you just stopped revising history, read the scoreboard every once in a while, and all the times you've been wrong, right? And if you wanted the Charlo fight, now he's giving you the Charlo fights. You wanted him to fight black fighters. You can't say, no, not now. He's the same fighter now that he was 2 years ago. You're going to pretend now like these dudes are diluted. No, we've been telling you for years, these aren't those dudes. Boo Boo was never that dude. We saw it against Benavidez. Charlo has never been that dude. We've been telling you. So one thing I don't want to hear is the dudes who have been calling the Charlos the boogeymen for years. I don't want to see the revisionist history. You're wrong. And Canelo's about to run through both of them if the reporting's true. The other thing I don't want to hear is for you dudes who have been doing Canelo's afraid of Bud, Canelo's afraid of Benavidez. We've been telling you, pick one. Pick one. Nail one down. Pick one. And for you dudes who said Bud's the boogeyman, Canelo will never fight a guy moving up who's that great pound for pound and can exploit him with all of his weaknesses and all that stuff. You better stand on business. We're transparent about when we're wrong here. We're not going to change things. And for you dudes who have been saying Bud is all wrong for Canelo and Canelo's not going to take that fight and then Bud's going to destroy Canelo. Bud's going to box circles around him, box his ears off, all this stuff. Don't change your tune now. Because I've seen that too. That track record is whenever Canelo signs a fight, then the tune changes. Then it's, no, Caleb Plant's not invited to the cookout anymore. Neither is Billy Joe Saunders. They were never that good. Wait a second. What? So I don't want to hear from those dudes. Don't want to hear from them. On the macro level, what's going to happen here if this reporting is true, Charlo and then Benavidez in September, Bud in September. Let's assume it's true. Big assumption to make because none of us know. Let's say it's true. What the market is going to do is it's going to reward Canelo versus Bud in September. Big time. Big time. That's going to be a huge fight. That's arguably the biggest fight to be made in boxing. Let's be honest about this for a second. D-Style and I had this little debate a while ago, months ago, is what's the bigger fight? This was after Bud versus Spence, and then when Bud started to change his tune, right? Because before Bud was like, I'll never go up past 158. Those guys are big up there. Then he goes on a Breakfast Club and says something like, I want Canelo. I want him full-blown at 168. When those conversations started to happen, I said, whoa. Bud's a real one, first of all, because I believe him when he says it. Number one. I don't believe that Bud's going to do anything like Mel and pretend to dare to be great and then go up there and lay down for Canelo. It's just not in his DNA. It's not. So when Bud challenges someone specifically and he targets one specifically, he's targeting you. And it's not just for a payday. He's targeting you. He's saying, you're prey. I'm going to go out and hunt you. This is it. This is what daring to be great looks like when I do it, because I mean it. I stand behind my words. I'm that type of dude. I saw that. I said, whoa. So me and D-Style got into the conversation on air, and I said, I think Canelo versus Bud is actually the bigger fight than Canelo versus Benavidez. And he says, no. I said, I think legacy-wise, Canelo beating Bud will probably be viewed better 10, 15 years from now than Canelo versus Benavidez, right? But we both came out saying we both want Canelo versus Benavidez in September. We both want it. He actually wanted it in May. I said September, as long as he gives me a fight in September, I still want the Canelo versus Benavidez fight. Divisions have to matter. Defending your titles and your crowns have to matter. And with Canelo versus Benavidez, it's not just legacy. It's not just titles. There's something different behind it because, as I pointed out earlier, when you have Canelo, Benavidez, and Munguia in the same division and Pacheco coming out, it becomes something different because those are all Mexican or Mexican-American fighters. The Mexican-American fan base is different. It's an intelligent fan base. They get a bad rap. They get a bad rap of liking caveman style fighting, and they don't like smart fighters and all this stuff. Their Mexican fan base is very intelligent. And as long as you're fighting the fights, they will gravitate towards you and they will be forgiving if you have losses, as long as you continue to be that guy. It's why for the people out there acting like the Mexican fan base isn't intelligent and will just adopt anybody who's Mexican, it's not an easy fan base to get. And it's not an easy fan base to keep, because it's easy in that the path is easy. It's simple in that you just fight the fights, right? But that's hard, fighting the fights consistently. It's hard. It's difficult. Chavez Jr. inherited the greatest fan base in boxing. Hardcore Mexican fan base and Mexican Americans. He inherited them. And over time, slowly, it deteriorated. He lost them. Why? Because they're watching his career. And they're like, this isn't what I signed up for. He's not even close to being his dad, but I didn't even need him to be his dad. I just need him to fight the fights. I just needed him to care more about boxing than walk around in the living room in a pink Speedo, eating Lucky Charms, doing cannonballs in the pool in the backyard while his dad's trying to give him advice about fighting and his opponent. And he doesn't care enough to go to the gym, to drive to the gym. He's just moving living room furniture to the side to train and hit the pads for his fight with Sergio Martinez. And they're looking at like, what is that? Over time, that's the behavior that separated him from the greatest fan base in boxing. He had the greatest built-in base in boxing, and he lost it. So that proves to you that you got to work if you want to keep that base. You got to work. Jaime Munguia, it's a good start. Derevinchenko, John Ryder, but you got to work. You got to continue to put in that work. And with Canelo, Canelo has put in that work throughout his career. He's put in that work throughout his career to grow his base universally, but at the same time, stay attached to the Mexican base, his core. He's understood legacy wise, as long as I'm end up in that top 5 Mexican fighters of all time, then I'm on the all-time pound for pound list. That's all I have to do. My peers are the all-time great Mexican fighters. Just look, modern era, Marquez, Morales, right? Gallo Estrada. You look at fighters like that. That's who he's emulating. That's who he's trying to stay on the list with. That's who he's trying to jump. And he realizes the higher I go up that list, that's the higher I go up the all-time pound for pound list, because with Mexican legacy, it's different. It's a different legacy. It's a different legacy. It's a different fan base. And he understands as long as he's somewhere on that list and the higher he gets up that list, that's the more respect he has universally and all time. He understands that. He understands Mexican boxing legacy, right? But here's the thing. Once you stop behaving like that fighter, I've talked about this. Canelo built his base. The media didn't do it, and the media can't detach him from his base. You can't do it. Only Canelo can detach himself from that base. And the only way he can do that is to stop fighting the fight, stop behaving like the fighter that everybody grew to love. And so let's say this is true, right? So the good thing about it is Canelo versus Bud Crawford may do over 2 million pay-per-view buys. Just might. And it's going to please the market in that way. It's going to be a legacy fight, whether people like it or not. 3 weight classes separated. I understand all that stuff, but it's going to be a legacy fight at the same time. And so here's the good news for the Canelo fans is the market's going to reward that fight. Here's the bad news for the Canelo fans. Now you have a scenario playing out in which perception is everything, and it's believable that he's ducking David Benavidez. More on that in a minute. Here's the good news for the David Benavidez fans is that they can now go out and prance around and say Canelo's ducking us. He's ducking us. Here's the bad news for the Benavidez fans is Benavidez has been outsold in Phoenix by Jaime Munguia. David Benavidez can't draw pay-per-view buys. He just can't. And if I was a business channel, I would harp on that, but I'm not. I'm not. Here's how I'm going to navigate it, specifically on an individual level, is both things can be true, right? I will reward Canelo versus Bud because I'm buying that fight because I'm intrigued by it. I'm intrigued. But at the same time, Bud is taking the risk in that fight. And you could say, like, that's debatable, right? Because Canelo has even said, what do I have to gain for that fight, right? If I lose, I lost to a smaller guy. If I win, I beat him. So maybe you could say he's assuming risk. I don't know. But I'll reward that fight market-wise. But here's the thing. When it comes to Canelo versus Benavidez, I felt there's an acceptable window in which Canelo needs to fight that fight. And if he doesn't fight that fight within that window, if this reporting is true, once again, if he doesn't fight that fight within the window, I'm not going to debate these dudes saying Canelo's ducking Benavidez anymore, because at that point, they have a scenario in which they can rejoice. Canelo's not fighting Benavidez. And at this point, if the sanctioning bodies do what they're supposed to do, because they're supposed to do that in this case, Canelo fights a 154-pounder. Then he fights a 160-pounder moving up from 168. And then he fights a 147-pounder. No matter how we slice it as far as names And as far as he's fighting black fighters now, you want him to fight black fighters, all that stuff, right? To poke fun at those people. But that's what you have at that point. And you have a guy who is no longer active at 168. And for me, as a boxing fan, that turns me off. I got to be honest. So that's where we get into the cloudy territory is I'm going to reward Canelo versus Bud because I'm intrigued by it. But at the same time, I don't agree with doing Charlo as a lead up to Bud. I don't agree with 154, 160, 147 pound fighter. And then 168, you're the top guy at 168 and you're not doing anything at 168. I understand he defended the belts against Charlo moving up from 154 at 168, but he's not a 168 pounder, fellas. And at that point, Canelo, I'm going to say this right now. If Canelo announces a fight with Charlo, and then a Benavidez fight is not announced right after that fight, or if it looks like it's not leading to a Benavidez fight in September, I say strip him of all the belts. Strip him. It's the same scenario as Maul. Maul's not defending anything at 160. Even when he comes back, he's not defending the belt, so strip him. And it's the same thing with Canelo. If he's not going to fight Benavidez by September 2024, you got to strip him. There has to be an acceptable time frame in which Canelo fights that fight and defends his belt against the guy that everybody wants him to defend against if he fights in a 168-pound fight. And if he fights against Bud, it may be a fight at 168, but that shouldn't be an acceptable fight for a champion at 168. And at that point, you got to strip him. That's what I'm saying. And people may not like to hear me say that. I will support Canelo versus Bud. It's an intriguing fight. I like the fight. Actually, I might grow to love that fight. But at the same time, as a champion at 168, you have to defend your crown against other guys campaigning at 168 within a time frame. And if you're not doing that, strip him. He's got to come off those belts. And the good news for Canelo is he's been there, done that. I've said this about Pacquiao when he was campaigning at welterweight and Floyd Mayweather. Why are they fighting for the belts at that point? Been there, done that. They don't need the belts at that point. Just trash them. Don't pay the sanctioning fees. And for Canelo, it may be that point, right? I don't need the belts at 168. But if he does that, what does that open himself up to, fellas? It opens himself up to he stopped short of fighting Benavidez. And perception is everything. And the Benavidez crowd, the pro-Benavidez crowd is going to say he's ducking Benavidez. And at that point, even as I'm supporting Canelo versus Bud in that fight, I will support it. I will buy it. I'll be excited about it. I can't say those dudes are wrong at that point. To me, you've had a window in which it's acceptable for you to fight that fight, even with fighting Bud by September 2024, and you don't do it. And those dudes are going to run with it. And I'm not going to battle them. They can have it. At that point, if this reporting is true and he announces he's fighting Maul Charlo in May, without even knowing what September is, because it could be Bud, it could be Benavidez, without even knowing, at that point, I take Canelo and sort of drop him down my pound-for-pound rankings at that point, fellas, because you have fighters putting on pound-for-pound level performances at this point. I know Canelo has been outpacing them as far as activity, and that's why we give him that forgiveness, right? But what you have is I'm holding Canelo to a higher standard. I always have. Always have. So it comes with the territory with being face of boxing and with being an all-time great. We expect more from these fighters. And Bud Crawford, that's a great fight. It's a hell of a fight. But at the same time, you have to defend your crown and your titles at 168, and he's not doing that. So we got to strip him. And then I think at that point, when he announces to fight Maul Charlo, let's say he does that, I think you got to take him down a couple spots on the pound-for-pound list. At that point, why? Because 154, face a guy at 154, now he's facing a guy who hasn't fought at 168 yet. So I think you got to drop him down the pound-for-pound list to the bottom half of it. Just where I'm at. And it becomes that cloudy territory. It becomes both things could be true at one time, and that the market is going to reward Canelo versus Bud. It is. That's arguably the biggest fight that could be made in boxing. And it's intriguing. And also, it adds to Canelo's legacy if he wins that fight, because 10, 15 years from now, people are just going to see Canelo beat Bud. That's what the Benavidez crowd's not going to like. That's what boxing purists may not like that. They might see this as a novelty fight. I get it. But I'm telling you, like, stuff we get in the weeds with as boxing fans. 10, 15 years from now, people don't even remember. People don't remember a fighter blowing off weight, missing weight by 3-4 pounds, and then winning a fight. They don't remember that 10 years later. They don't remember that a year later. And I've been told this by boxing insiders that Canelo's viewpoint right now is he's tired of fighting the tough fights and watching fighters who are taking the easier road and flashy fights and getting rewarded for it while he's taking the tough fights and taking more criticism. I've been told this. And they've been telling me, Calix, I don't think he's going to fight Benavidez within this 3-fight deal. I think you're wrong. And this sort of adds up to that. But once again, I go back to, if you don't fight Benavidez in 2024, you got to be stripped of the belts. And I think Canelo starts to go down that pound for pound list. And once again, these are things Canelo might not care about at this point. He might not care. He just might care about making a lot of money and being in entertaining fights and entertaining his crowd. But at some point, man, at some point, that fight has to happen, Canelo Benavidez. But in the meantime, the longer Canelo waits, those belts have to come off him. And this is another. Look at Benavidez as an example. How Benavidez handles this will tell us a lot about Benavidez. And he has an opportunity here to come out and reach out and do an outreach to people like me and real boxing fans who just want to see fighters fight the fights, right? And fighters move correctly. So he started that. He fought Plant. He fought Boo Boo. Great performance against Boo Boo. He's applying pressure to Canelo. And if Canelo drops these belts to fight smaller fighters, I'm just telling you, this is how it's going to be viewed. And Benavidez has a golden opportunity here to jump on this. It's going to be viewed as Canelo fought a 154-pounder, fought a 160-pounder. Now he's going to fight a 147-pounder. And I'm number 2 in this division waiting for this shot. I've been putting pressure on him. I've been doing what y'all have been telling me to do and fight the fights. And I'm sitting here waiting for my shot and I'm not getting it. Now it's my turn to get the belts. He told D-Style on HCP years ago, he said, I messed up, man. I lost my belt on the scale. I got to work myself way back up to get these shots at Canelo, get the shots at the belts. He's done that now. But here's the thing. I want to see how David Benavidez maneuvers around this, if this reporting is true. If it looks like he's not getting a Canelo shot at 168 in 2024, how does he deal with that? Does he whine? Does he gnash his teeth and then just go fight Jesse Hart? Is that the move? Because if so, he's dropping an opportunity here. People are going to be out there saying what they were saying about Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis at 147 when Bud and Errol weren't fighting each other, right? Bud and Errol aren't going to fight each other. Then why should we fight guys and risk losing to guys, tough guys underneath them in the top 10? We're just going to wait our position until we get our shot, right? That's what we don't want to see. For Benavidez, as Nando said earlier, the end-all, be-all doesn't have to be Canelo. He has an opportunity here. It's going to be viewed by a lot of people in the boxing space, even people who support the Bud fight, that Canelo is now standing on business at 168. Canelo doesn't want to fight fighters his size. I'm telling you, it's going to be how it's viewed by a lot of people. So Benavidez can take this opportunity and become the anti-Canelo at 168, the guy who fights the fights at 168, the top fighters currently at 168. He can be the guy who goes out and fights Morrell Jr. and mows that guy down. And this is where I'm going to rub the Benavidez fans the wrong way. Why does he have to fight Morrell Jr. if Canelo's fighting smaller guys? Stop worrying about Canelo. You're doing the right thing on putting pressure on Canelo, but this doesn't have to be all about Canelo. If Canelo does not fight the fights at 168 and they let him keep these belts, we're going to call it out. Don't worry about it. We're going to call that out. We're not moving goalposts. We're going to call that out, even if we like the Bud fight. We're going to call it out. We're going to say Canelo no longer belongs number one at 168, belongs with these belts, and belongs at 2, 3, 4 in the pound-for-pound rankings if he's not fighting the fights at 168. They should strip him. And all you have to do is continue to beat the guys at the top of the rankings. You fought Caleb Plant. Boo Boo wasn't at 168, top 10 or lower end, whatever, but if you fight a Morrell Jr., something like that, you're putting yourself at risk. I get it. But look at what comes on the other end of that. You can be the younger Canelo here. When we had Roberto Diaz on the show last year, Roberto Diaz talked about a scenario in which Floyd Mayweather called Canelo's people and said, y'all need to fight on our undercard. You're going to fight on our undercard. And Canelo said, if I'm going to fight on your undercard, I want assurances that I fight you next. And Mayweather said, I don't give assurances. It's not what's going to happen. I'm not going to give you an assurance. It's not. You're going to fight on my undercard. You're going to take what I give you. And Canelo said, go to hell. Go to hell. Go to hell. And what happened next ended up defining Canelo and why I'm telling you he's grown his base the way he's grown it. Roberto Diaz and the Golden Boy crew comes back to him and says, all right, you're not going to fight Austin Trout on Floyd Mayweather's undercard. So what are we going to do next? What's the name? What's the name? Because we only have a small budget, so we can't be Austin Trout. And Canelo said, go make the Austin Trout fight. They're like, you don't understand. Like, you're only going to make half the money with this budget that we have, not being on the Floyd Mayweather undercard. So what are we going to do? Like, it can't be Austin Trout. Canelo said, go make my fight. It's going to be Austin Trout. So 6 weeks later, they put it in the Alamo Dome. It sells 40,000, and he beats Austin Trout. It's moves like that that end up defining fighters, and there's risk involved because you can lose to an Austin Trout, and he almost did, but he wins the fight. He parlays that into a Floyd fight, and they could have said it's too early for Floyd, and they did. They tried to talk him out of it. Roberto Diaz told us that. These are fights I did not like for Canelo. Yet he told us, go make the fights. I don't want to hear it. Go make it. Trout, Mayweather, Lara, go make my fights. And he fought him. And that ended up defining Canelo. And it's why people became attached to Canelo, because he's fighting the fights. There were people that are going to be revisionist history on this saying he'll never fight Golovkin. He fought him 3 times. And they're still doing revisionist history to this day, saying he aged out Golovkin. Within 17 months of becoming lineal champion, that fight was signed and announced. This is hard for me to say because I'm a Canelo and Golovkin fan. But he didn't age out Canelo. He didn't age out Golovkin. He wins the lineal title. Sergio Martinez and Miguel Cotto wanted no parts of Golovkin. They treated his name like Voldemort. You shall never speak that name. Canelo comes out, 17, 18 months, signs that fight. Within 22 months, fights the fight. It's a pretty bad aging out process if you tried to age out Golovkin. Pretty bad aging out process. And the same people that are saying stuff like that will ignore fighters, their favorite fighters who are going 14, 18 months without fighting fights. I disagree. Benedictez agreed with Suleiman for September. Shout out Elwin Castillo. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Agreed with Suleiman for September. So maybe you're saying that you think the Benavidez fight's happening in September. And once again, we have to trust this reporting that it's true. I don't know if it's true. I've learned long ago never to take this reporting as gospel until we get an announcement. And I know nothing. None of us know nothing about what's going on in Canelo's inner circle and what's going on with Al's inner circle. We don't know. We have to take this as truth. All I'm saying is I'm just taking this as an opportunity to say how I'm going to navigate things if it is true. And how I'll navigate things is I'll support Canelo versus Bud in that fight because I like the fight. It's going to be a huge fight. The market's going to reward that fight. And it's going to be viewed as a legacy fight. It is. And Canelo detractors, Benavidez lovers are not going to like that. They're not going to like hearing that. What I'll also say is if that reporting is true, I was wrong because I thought Canelo versus Benavidez would happen by September. I was wrong. And what I'll also say is if that's the move, then Canelo has to, they have to take those belts from him. They have to. If you're not fighting 168 pounders, why are they allowing him to keep 168 pound belts if the reporting is true? That's when you start to have to strip belts. And those are going to be uncomfortable conversations because Canelo's going to look at him and say, you're really going to take this off me? You know who I am? You know who I am? You know who I am, right? You know who I am? You're not going to allow me to fight Bud for undisputed at 168? You're not going to allow me to do that? You know who I am, right? You know who I am. And those are going to be uncomfortable conversations. But if they do the right thing, they will not allow Canelo versus Bud for undisputed at 168. They will say, look, man, the WBC in particular will say, you have to fight Benavidez by September, or you got to come off that belt. You have to. It's only right for Benavidez, who's doing the right things at this point. So it's two different things, right? And two different things can be true at once. Canelo versus Bud could be a good fight, but I hate Canelo versus Maul. I'm just on the record with that. I hate that fight. And I'm not high on Maul. Never have been. And this is what I'm saying, Nando. I don't think Canelo even wants each and every belt anymore. He just wants to fight on his own terms. I agree. I agree. And I've said in the past, there comes a point when certain fighters are above the belts. You have lower level fighters who feel like they're above the belts and they're not. Fighters make the belts at this point, right? Unless you're at the lower level, and then the belt makes the fighter. O'Shake Foster is an example of that. He needs that belt. He needs the belt. He needs the belt for leverage. He needs that belt. Canelo doesn't need these belts, right? But they still need to strip him. There's the thing. If he's not going to fight Benavidez by September, he still needs to be stripped. You can't hold on to him. So if Canelo wants to fight on his own terms, fair enough. But just don't hold on to the belts and don't hold up the division at the same time. That's all I'm saying. And I may have some allies that are not happy with me for saying that stuff, but it is what it is. It doesn't change what I think of Canelo as a fighter up to this point. It doesn't change what I think of Canelo versus Bud because I like that fight. I love that fight. And it's going to be huge. The fight's going to be huge. Huge. Would not surprise me to see that go over 2 million buys. Be huge. And by the way, imagine if Bud does win that fight. Imagine that. Imagine the stardom that now Bud has stumbled upon. And imagine where his legacy goes at that point. If he destroys Errol Spence and then beats Canelo Alvarez. And then, oh, by the way, if Bud beats Canelo, then you got a rematch. And that would be big. Right? But we're talking about two different things here, and both can be true. As far as divisional business, we got to get things moving at 168. And if the reporting is true, then you have a scenario in which Canelo fought a 154 pounder, a 160 pounder moving up, and a 147 pounder. And then we need to get these belts in a vacuum. And we need to have fighters fight for these belts. And we need to reward fighters who have been waiting, and now it's their shot. The Benavidez's, the Mbillis, the Munguias, and then we get things mixed up. And then Canelo can always come back in 2025 and say, all right, I want my belts back. Let's go. Let's go. All comers. All comers. 168. And Chicano is right. Canelo versus Crawford is for the era. That's right. He's right. It's a big fight. Canelo versus Crawford's a big fight. And you could argue it's for whose era this is. And I argue with D-Style it's the bigger fight. I argued it's the better legacy fight. So who am I to say he shouldn't take this fight? You're right. You're right. It's not an easy thing to navigate. But what I'm telling you is era is bigger than weight class business for September. Okay, fair enough. But that doesn't take away the fact that weight class business needs to be taken care of. So then let's put the belts in a vacuum. Let's get the belts in a vacuum. Right? And let's have these fighters fight for belts. And let's start to get Benavidez versus Morrell Jr. And for the Benavidez fans, we're going to say, why they got to fight Morrell Jr. if Canelo's fighting? I don't want to hear it. You don't have to make this about Canelo all the time. If it's looking like Canelo's going in a different direction, if he's fighting a legacy fight, if he's fighting a big fight that maybe is bigger than yours, a fight with you, I want to see how you handle that scenario. I want to see if you take that and run with it. I want to see if you start the fight, continue to fight the fights at 168, fight fighters like Morrell Jr., try to make cross-promotion fights with the Munguia, with an Mbili, and if so, then we got a scenario playing out in which Benavidez can make his own stardom. And if Canelo wants to come back and fight fights at 168 at that point, there's no getting around a Benavidez fight. He has to fight it at some point. Has to. Even if Benavidez were to move up to 175. That'll always be there. It's always going to be a thing. Always. But this is what I'll say in finality with this is it's a big fight if the reporting's true. I don't like Mal Charlo fight. Don't like it. But if Bud Crawford's a fight in September, huge fight. It's for the era. All that stuff. But at the same time, weight class business needs to be taken care of. You have to understand that Benavidez has put the proper pressure on Canelo up to this point to where if Canelo does go in the direction of Bud, you have to understand this, fellas. This is going to be out there. It's going to be out there that Canelo's ducking Benavidez. You got to deal with it. And Canelo's got to come off those belts. It's got to come off the belts. And you're going to have a scenario in which possibly Canelo moves down pound for pound rankings. But if he beats Bud, maybe he stays up there. I don't know. We'll have to see. But weight class business needs to be taken care of. And if it's not, then belts need to become vacant. That's where I'm in with it. That's where I'm in with it. Canelo destroys Crawford. Hope it happens. Easiest bet of my life. Crazy how Canelo is getting away, still having the belts by fighting lower weight class fighters. Shaking my head. And this is the sentiment I'm talking about. And he's not wrong. I can't say he's wrong. If this is the direction, fellas, yes, you're going to be able to frame it in two different. It's for the era. Canelo versus Bud will be for the era. And the market will reward that fight. But I'm not a business guy at the same time when it comes to boxing. This isn't a business channel. And it's going to be out there that Canelo's not fighting Benavidez. That's the boogeyman and he's not fighting him. That's the boogeyman, he's not fighting him. And you're going to have people calling for him to come down pound for pound rankings, to come off of the belts. That stuff is going to be out there, and you got to get used to it. It's going to be out there. It's going to be out there. Just telling you. I'm just telling you. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Ultimately, in the meantime, 168's hot. It's heating up. And Munguia, what a performance by Munguia. I want that to be the story for today. I know we swerved off after the first 30 minutes and talked about Canelo and all that stuff. It's the Canelo news cycle. That's how it is. But I wanted to use that opportunity. Usually I ignore the news cycle, but I wanted to use that opportunity to frame how I view this and how multiple things can be true at once and how this is going to be a big fight. But I'm very intrigued by how Canelo is going to navigate this point in his career. Is it going to be a Floyd type of a career? Is it going to be a Hopkins type of career where he does fight younger guys and then moves up pound for pound rankings all the time? Or is it going to be a Roy Jones type of career where he does stick around and fight younger guys and loses those fights? I don't know. We'll see. But in the meantime, if this is the good thing is 168's hot, is talented, and it's exciting. That's the good news. And we have other stars starting to enter the chat. Munguia has entered the chat, and he's going to be a star. But as far as the reporting and all this stuff, weight class business does need to be addressed, fellas. That's just the way it is. And if Canelo decides this point in my career, I want it to be about big fights, flashy fights, legacy fights, such as Bud Crawford, fine. That's fine. But at the same time, if the top fighters at 168 are not being, I'm not going to be a Floyd Mayweather type fan. I'm just not. I'm not going to be a Tank Davis type fan here. I'm not going to say things like, I'm sorry. You're not going to hear me say things like David Benavidez can't draw flies to crap. David Benavidez was outdrawn, and he was outdrawn by Jaime Munguia in Phoenix, Arizona. And that speaks to the star level of Jaime Munguia. But you're not going to hear me say that to hold back organic demand for Canelo versus Benavidez, because it's there. It's there. Not going to hear me do it. I'm not going to be one of those fans. I'm not going to move the goalposts on these guys. So if this is the move, 168 business needs to be taken care of. So we need to put these belts in a vacuum and allow these other fighters to fight for titles. Because for these fighters, belts do matter. For Canelo, the belts may not matter anymore. He's above them. He may not care about being undisputed at 168 anymore. He may never care about fighting for another belt the rest of his career. But other fighters do. So if this is the move, if the move is, I'm not worried about 168 business, then fine. Just drop the belts or strip them. That's what we got to, and if you're Benavidez, continue to apply pressure. That's fine, but don't harp on it. And don't go fight Jesse Hart if you're not going to get the fight. Continue to apply pressure on the market. Continue to build your name by fighting meaningful fights. And then for the people out there like myself whose eyes are starting to wander, who see Mel and then Maul and are like, our eyes start to wander a little bit. And we say, Jaime Munguia looks good. Benavidez looked really good against Boo Boo. If you continue to give us stuff to be excited about, then we go over there. We go there. I'm not holding back for anybody. I was a Miguel Cotto fan his whole career up until the end, where he started to say things like Gennady Golovkin. When he was asked about Gennady Golovkin, all of a sudden he forgets English. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go like Gennady Golovkin then. That's just how I am. It is what it is, fellas. It is what it is. We'll see if the reporting is true. Jaime Munguia is a star. He is a star. God bless. Peace.